Good morning, Rabotai. Last week we spoke about the concept of taxes that were collected in the Jewish communities in the Sephardic countries, and particularly in Morocco. And basically the system, how it worked, is that if the government demanded a certain amount of taxes, or the city amongst themselves, that they needed things in order to be collected from the people, so they would have these tax collectors of the Jewish community that would have to come back and give out and give back the taxes to the governor. This was also common in European countries. One of the big questions that it seems to be, there was many teshuvot written. I would say a very large emphasis. I would say that it's something that was probably one of the most pressing issues of the day. Was who is obligated to pay these taxes and who isn't? Are there special exemptions for taxes? The Rama writes in Choshen Mishpat, Siman Kuf Samech Gimel Seif Hey, that Talmide Hackhamim, the Shulchan Aruch writes, that Talmide Hackhamim are exempt from taxes. And the reason given, if you take a look at the Bet Yosef, is even if a Talmid Chacham has money, the whole purpose of taxation is in order so that there should be a protection. And since Toratam Umnutam, since a Talmid Chacham adds protection to the city from the very virtue that he is learning Torah, he's exempt from taxes. You can understand this was very controversial. Many people were saying, what do you mean? I see this person, even though he's not really a Talmid Chacham. That's number one. He has a lot of business. Number two. Number three is that who falls under Talmid Chacham? What type of level does he have to be? Do we have to test him on all knowledge of Torah or not? These were all questions that had to be dealt with. Furthermore, Rabbi Shalom Esas has a teshuvah in Shemesh Umagen Chele Gimel that he was asked by the city of Beitar that they each person has to pay a certain amount so that they could watch the city, so that they have shmirah, because it's over the green line and there's Arab villages next to there. So he was asked, do Talmid Chachamim have to participate? So there was a certain Talmid Chacham called Rav David Teherani that said, no, in this case Talmid Chachamim have to pay. And Rabbi Shalom says goes strong against him, and he says Talmidei Chachamim are exempt from all types of taxes, even Shmirat Ha'ir, that they're going to be exempt, even if in Beitar most people are Talmidei Chachamim, it's a city of kolel guys. A lot of it is a city of kolel guys, so I don't know how they're going to collect the taxes. It's like I know somebody I said the story before that somebody went into a store in Lakewood, and he said that he wants to have a discount on the suit because he's an avrech. It's not so easy to do. So the question is what is the level of a Talmid Chacham? So I have with me the Sefer Mishpat Utzdaka B'Yaakov, which is actually a verse in Tehillim. This has the teshuvot of the most important Rabbanim in Morocco in the previous era. We called it the golden era of the 1700s. That there were great Rabbanim. It was a great renaissance of Torah in Morocco. You had there the Gaon Rabbi Yaakov ibn Sur, the Rabbi Yehuda ben Attar, who was the Av Bedin. Right. It was the Tkufa a little bit after the Baal Shem Tov. It was a little bit the time the Orah Chaim HaKadosh is quoted in his Teshuvot. Rabbi Yehuda ben Attar gave askama to one of the books of the Orah Chaim HaKadosh, and the Rabbi Yaakov ibn Sur as well. They were the great Rabbanim of the time, and there's other Rabbanim that we'll mention as well. But the pressing issue, there's like at least 10 teshuvot about this in the Sefer. It keeps on going on and on. Was whether a Talmid Chacham who works should pay taxes as well. So it seems to be that there were those who said a Talmid Chacham does not have to pay. A Talmid Chacham does not have to pay taxes only if he's like sitting and learning all day and he's poor and he has no money. Makes sense. But if he has money, why shouldn't he participate with everyone else? And I actually saw, if I'm not mistaken, in Shalot Utshuvot Divrei Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Dirdugo, that takes this position. And he says that a Talmid Chacham, and even if he would be exempt, it's proper for him to pay. That way people shouldn't have animosity, and they shouldn't say, "What? It's not fair that we're paying and he's not." And that's what there was a position like that. The Bet Din of Fez, which was the most influential Bet Din at the time, as well as other Bate Dinim, took a very strong stance against this. First of all, they quote, what is, and in this teshuvot, even though you see it's not so relevant nowadays, we're paying American taxes or whatever, which, by the way, American taxes do have this clause. Parsonage, which is for clergy members, they do have exemptions from taxes. So there is such a remnant of tax nowadays also. But I'm saying is that we're not going to be able to apply the same principles and tell them they actually, for me, if in order for me to get an exemption of clergy, I had to provide my smicha document. Never used it before, but over here I had to present my smicha document. So I actually had smicha. Not everyone has smicha. Baruch Hashem. Last week I tested 6 people for smicha. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem, and they. Guys like you that are sitting and that are working, but they got very good grades actually. One of them was getting up every morning at 3 a.m. preparing in order to take his test properly. It was a 6-7 hour test.
Wow.
Most of them were doctors. Doctors have very good discipline and learning. Okay, but that's another subject. So here we have the Mishpat U'Tzedakah B'Yaakov. Comes along and he says the following, that the basis of exempting of a Talmid Chacham from taxes, because Torato Mnuto, and even if he has money, is based on the Rosh. And here he has a few principles in halacha that we get from these teshuvot that are relevant to many other teshuvot. And he says like this, in Mishpat U'Tzedakah Siman Resh Chaf, signed by Rabbi Yehuda ben Atar, who was coined in the Moroccan terms as El Kbir, the great one, and Rabbi Yaakov ibn Sur, the Ya'avetz HaSfaradi, the 2 great Rabbanim of the time, they write like this, that since the Rosh writes that the main reason is because he is protecting the city, and what is called Talmid Chacham, that any time he finishes his business, whatever he needs, he runs back to his learning. Ela makom asher yifneh harosh acharav yelchu kol yishrei lev. It's an expression on the words. The Rosh was the great rabbi of the times, but an expression on the word was that where the head goes, where the Rosh goes, that's where we go. So that's what they were saying, that, and that's how the Rosh was posek, and that's how we go. Now he adds on something that it seems to be was a very hot topic, and he ends off and he says like this: Ubechen nosif anachnu lomar. We are going to say that anybody who pressures this person, Harav Moshe, and he makes him pay tax, he's going to have to give judgment after 120, and he's going to get a punishment that is more bitter than death. And anybody who has mercy on him and encourages him, he's going to have a reward from it. I mean, Hashamayim, they will give him mercy on this. Ne'um HaChotmim, and they're going to say the following, and we will add the following: from the time that the Kehilot started to throw the crown of Torah and to tax Talmide Chachamim as part of the ones who pay tax, and they would run after them, from that time and on, Lo Ra'u Or Ba'avonoteinu Arabim, they haven't seen light, because they should have relied on Hashem, and Hayalem Liftoach B'Hashem V'Lisha'en Be'Eloheim Le'aniach Olam Ki Minago Noheg, to leave it the way it was before. And it says, it seems to be there was a certain movement to say no, Talmidei Chacham should be taxed nowadays. It seemed to be there was a tremendous downfall in the community. Doesn't explain exactly what. And he says that because of that, from the time that we did it, we just saw problems. And then afterwards, you have Rabbi Moshe Berduga, Rabbi Moshe Adahan, Rabbanim from Meknes. They say the following lines: all the midot were nidbatel, were nullified. Besides midah keneged midah, which is midah keneged midah, which tit for tat. And just like somebody, we weakened the hands of Lomdei Torah, thank you, and the Keter of Torah fell, so too we came under this punishment. And then there is somebody called Rav Shimon Siboni, right? Shalom Siboni. Sorry, Shimon is the Chazan nowadays. But Shalom Siboni was a Dayan at the time. He says, "HaTorah chogeret sak." The Torah is crying that these kehilot are suffering now because we put on this tax. Upuk chazi mai saliku. Look what happened once we start putting these tax. We haven't seen light in the cities of the West, in the cities of Morocco. Like the great tzaddik Rav Yehuda ben Attar just said in the previous page. So it seemed to be a very, very contested issue. And they go on, this is in Mishpat Tzedakah B'Yaakov. I was reading from a Teshuvah Siman Resh Chaf. But then all the way then in Siman Rish Nun Hey, Rish Nun Dalet, not only that, they are discussing, first of all, they discuss one of the big Talmide Hackhamim of Shmuel Di Abila, that he was complaining that they were taxing him. He was the brother-in-law, if I'm not mistaken, of the Ora Haim HaKadosh. He was a great Talmid Chacham. He wrote many Sfarim. And they wouldn't leave him alone. The people were after him to tax him, and got very upset at him. They got very upset at him, the Bidin. Siman Kuf Nun Dalet, another big Teshuvah from Rav Yehuda ben Attar and the Ya'avetz, once again, is disproportionate. How many teshuvot there are over here? Me'ata Zekin Radin, he says, not only that, but the minhag in Morocco was also the shamash of the Bet HaKnesset, and also the shochatim, and those who taught the children Torah, and those who were the sofrim, and of tefillin and mezuzot will also be exempt from taxes. And this is obviously that they're not a Talmid Chacham, because if not, what's the chidush? We're talking about even if they weren't, if they're not a Talmid Chacham, they're also patur. This is brought down actually in the Ramah, and they write that this was their minhag. לספילי רבותינו בתים של בנינו פסקו לשמשי בית הכנסת שפטורים מיסים ומארנונות, ושם נאמר שכך היה מנהג פשוט וברור במדינת פס מדורות הקודמים. And he keeps on going, and he brings, and they try, and they defend many Talmidei Chachamim in this regard. There was one Rav called Reb Chaim ben Ayash that also was saying that they were running after him, and he said, absolutely not. You're a shamash bet hakneset, you are patur. You have a little job on the side, but most of your time you have to be spending taking care of the synagogue. It was a whole job, and there had to be some fringe benefits. And if we're not going to give you fringe benefits, they were worried that the infrastructure of the religious community is going to fall. If the Talmidei Chacham are going to be taxing, they say, forget about it. We're not going to have any advantages. What should be our incentive of sitting and learning? And then they were afraid that, I think this must have been one of their calculations, that things were going to fall. And that not only included Talmidei Chachamim, but anybody who worked in the spiritual realm. Now, Nosaf al Zeh, he says, so he writes this in a few teshuvot, and I think that it's an important lesson for us in Siman Rish Tzadi Aleph. He talks about Rabbi Shmuel Di Abila, that it's an important lesson for us that we see how they made sure. In other words, they knew that more people were going to have to pay taxes because the Talmidei Chacham were exempt. But what happened was that they saw that if they're not going to protect the Kavod HaTorah, and we mentioned this a few weeks ago from the Chachamim of Marrakesh, I don't know if you remember, that they also saw that there was a tremendous bizayon of Talmidei Chachamim. They stopped it in their tracks. There was one Rav in Marrakesh. The one person in Marrakesh tried to tax. They even called him by his name. It was something like Yosef bin Attar. He tried to tax the community, and the Rabbanim came out. I think it was Rabbi Shlomo Amar came out very strong against him. How dare you tax the Talmidei Chachamim? Leave them alone. And this was the fight that was going on then in the 1700s. And there was a strong faction of people say everybody has to be taxed. Enough is enough. We can't afford it. And they refused to give in. And they said that a lot of the ikaron of Torah, of kavod Torah, is dependent upon this. So I thought that was an interesting perspective of history, even though it's not relevant nowadays, just to take a glimpse in their teshuvot, Mishpat Uzdaka Yaakov, 10 teshuvot or more, and they have very important principles in there, like that we go after the Rosh, and that he says the minhagim of the other cities were based on the minhagim of Fez. Vayomer Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Walid also brings this, and he adds on another point, and with this I'm going to end. He says the following, he says that even if the Talmid Chacham doesn't have daughters, and he doesn't have to marry off his daughters, which seemed to be was the biggest expense, but should his wife look different than all the other wives and not have as much jewelry and not have as much nice clothing as the other wives, and the wives of Talmid Chachamim should look any less than all the other wives? So he said, and he was quoting this from the Yavetz. So he says that itself was a reason as well to make sure to keep the fringe benefits that the Talmid Chachamim shouldn't have to pay taxes. Hazaku Baruch.